I'm Ryan O'Dowd, and you're listening to Ryan's Audiobooks on the Issues Magazine YouTube channel. Today I'm going to continue with section 412 of The Omega Seed by Paolo Soleri. We're continuing Book 4, Relative Poverty and Frugality. Arcology as intent. Synopsis. This is perhaps, as has been suggested, a humorless statement. I would say that the spicing of humor is essential if and when the chosen ingredients are appropriate. This statement attempts to define at least some of the ingredients of Arcology. It goes without saying that Arcology had better be able to smile, giggle, and laugh at itself. 1. It is not a commune or a utopia. 1. It is anti-utopian by design and content. 2. It does not support the contention of communes or utopias that individuals or groups can break away from society and achieve fulfillment. 2. It favors the notion that investigation and experimentation within defined time lapses can produce new and useful patterns for society. 3. It is not given to the notion of the Garden of Eden. 3. It is a town faced with the challenges of life. 4. It does not believe the millennium is at hand. 4. It believes in a quasi-infinite journey into the uncreated. 5. It does not believe in paradise on earth, nor does it see its task as the pursuit of such an imaginary condition. 5. It believes in an eventual grace far beyond our times and all times, and sees the human task as the indefatigable effort towards such grace. 6. It is not a group or a place where enlightenment and happiness are achieved because truth has been reached, as if truth were something defined a priori and available for discovery and use. 6. It's a group and a place attempting and coordinating things in a different way so as to better serve the family of man, not because truth has been discovered, but because a greater coherence can be established between the longings of man and the mysteries of the universe. 7. It does not want to position itself at the fringe of imminence as the ashram of salvation among the wreckage of humanity. 7. It would like to be at the cutting edge of the groping process in which humanity creates itself by being apprentice and master in one. 8. It cannot endorse the notion that the human species has fallen from grace and works towards redemption through good deeds or through the annihilation into which nirvana delivers us. 8. It does endorse the miraculous nature of the evolutionary process and its quasi-infinite perfectibility, leading to the total reenactment of itself in the final resurrectional condition. 9. It does not endorse the lifeboat paradigm, nor does it endorse the notion that it is pointless to build rafts or luxury liners until the passengers are dissected, reconstructed, and made socially acceptable. 9. It sees itself as an indispensable raft, the construction of which is imperative, even though acknowledging that the passengers in their society can and will be less than perfect. The raft would be the vehicle of continuous transcendence. 10. As it does not believe in the possibility of total fulfillment now, so it does not believe in the anointed people who attempt to impersonate the truth. 10. It acknowledges the immensity of the task ahead, which dwarfs the achievements of the past, and sees as pointless or opportunistic the notion of God's chosen people. 11. It does not believe in self-righteousness or self-pity, especially when most of humankind is on the verge of indigence and famine. 11. It believes in self-responsibility and in the recognition that we are and we do a fraction of that which we could be and could do. 12. It does not endorse the notion that all men are created equal, as if cloned from a God-given prototype. 12. It endorses the notion that the individual is born with his own original, specific, irrepeatable characteristics. 13. It does not believe in the reductionist paradigm and its mechanistic implications. 13. It believes that life supported by science and technology is a creational process, an aesthetic process. 14. It does not believe that the behavioral sciences can fully describe life and guide man toward fulfillment. 14. It believes that life consists of the art of living, and as such transcends the territory of science. 15. It is not simply oriented towards steady state and stewardship as the means to achieve harmony between oneself and nature within a somewhat unchanging universe. 15. It is oriented towards transcendence, the creation of ever-new relationships between the inanimate and the animate in favor of the latter to the end of a fully conscious universe. 16. It does not endorse the notion that in life simplification is for the better, the bias of both return to nature and technology. 16. It does endorse the notion that it is the nature of life to seek ever more complex and conscious relationships. 17. It is not anti-scientific, anti-technological, or anti-cultural, but it disavows the substitution of culture by technology. 17. It favors the notion that science and technology are instruments for the development of culture and for the transcendence of the existing into the new. 18. It cannot accept the notion that fire is natural and atomic fire is unnatural, or that we are bound forever by modes which are natural to the exclusion of modes which are unnatural. 18. It accepts the notion that eventually the living stuff of the universe will go beyond any danger signs, since the pursuit is of the total and ultimate end, therefore comprehends all and everything. 19. It does not believe in instant civilization or any other instant thing, including instant knowledge, instant grace, instant wisdom, or instant acculturation. 19. It does believe in development by personal toil and commitment to the necessity of growing into a better self through minute experimental steps. 20. It does not endorse the notion that the child is a natural artist because it does not endorse the idea that art is effortless and spontaneous. 20. It sees the aesthetic as the process by which the fundamental anguish of the human condition is transfigured into the aesthetic experience. 21. It has no sympathy for the deceiving notion that everyone is an original creator. 21. It endorses the notion that we can all be artists by mimesis and through vicariousness and gregariousness. 22. It does not see doing one's own thing as very relevant for either the individual or the human family. 22. It does see as imperative that one's own thing becomes our own thing, not by mob action, but by transcendence of the ego into the self, the human self. 23. It does not support the easy, quick, and fraudulent way out of mediocrity. 23. It is for an existentially difficult and protracted, in fact indefinitely protracted way in. 24. It does not believe that the pursuit of happiness is a valid goal, or that given the human condition it is attainable in anyone's lifetime. 24. It believes that the pursuit of worthiness illuminates the tragic nature of life with radiant moments of joy, which are the anticipation of a possible future fulfillment. 25. It cannot endorse intolerance, greed, violence, arrogance. 25. It must try to affirm tolerance, generosity, nonviolence, reverence. 26. It is not pessimistic or cynical, neither is it gullible or market-oriented. 26. It is optimistic and passionate, seeing quality as a quantitative measure of spirit. 27. It does not endorse opulent ways, the consumerist insurance mortgage ethos, or the transference of self-responsibility to others. 27. It endorses the frugal ways and sees the consumerist insurance-minded ethos as ultimately demeaning to the person, a postponement of commitment. 28. It has no use for the us and them notion, nor for the mob elitism of mediocrity. 28. It advocates the concept that at times a small group has to come out and beat new paths for the sake of all of us. 29. It cannot endorse the power of coercion and its consequences. 29. It endorses authority based on knowledge, the power of persuasion, and their consequences. 30. It does not endorse a Bill of Rights, any Bill of Rights, per se. 30. It endorses a Bill of Rights and a Bill of Duties as two inseparable halves of one whole. 31. It cannot sympathize with the Woodstock syndrome, the conversion by edict and mob fulfillment. 31. It endorses patient, disciplined seeking of understanding within the contradictions of the human condition. 32. It's not a countercultural, sectarian, or religious establishment, or a Zen center, a meditation center, or a neo-monastic center. 32. It intends to be a working model, a prototype that might be influential in transforming the environmental, social, and cultural character of the present. 33. It does not deem as momentous that the mind can bend a spoon or that willpower can alter the heartbeat. 33. It does deem momentous that life transforms matter into flesh, into mind, into spirit, of which spoon bending is a manifestation. 34. It does not see religion as revealed truth, nor does it see the holy books as documents of divine intervention into mismanaged human affairs. 34. It sees religion as myth-making and anticipatory modeling, and the holy books as collections of human wisdom or unwisdom and compassionate teaching. 35. It does not endorse tribal syndrome, the return to nature, the withdrawal of man from society, or pseudo-conservationist ethics. 35. It endorses the urban effect and the eschatology of the transformation of the physical into the living, the social, the cultural, the spiritual. 36. It does not identify with any church or any denomination, old or new, Eastern or Western, or with the limiting confines they might define for reality. 36. It does endorse the concept that through the evolutionary process, the miracle of life and spirit will pervade and consume the universe. 37. It does not believe in the benign or just Father God, expectant of a penitent or resigned humankind. 37. It believes in the possibility of a divine radiant God in the making whom life creates out of itself. 38. It does not believe in revelation and in its revealing God. 38. It believes in creation, which is the evolutionary process. 39. It does not believe in the distributive justice of a divine Father, resurrection of the dead, or in salvation. 39. It does believe that if the evolutionary process carries on to its conclusion, a state of total recall will be reached in which resurrection will be immensely revelational. 40. It does not believe that man is unchangeable, that is to say, has reached the apex of his potential. 40. It believes that man is an embryonic creature who might eventually develop into unimagining grace. 41. It does not endorse the idea that success is the only and indispensable proof of worthiness and grace, or that being recognized by the present is a sanction of one's worth. 41. It sees success in the often ambiguous light of something that, by being ripe for its own time, might ultimately fail its appointment with destiny and fall short of future expectations. 42. It does not endorse a condition which fails to recognize a hierarchy of values, performances, meaning, substance, and responsibilities. 42. It supports the condition where movement along a hierarchy of responsibilities and performances might become the normal experimental process of growth for any person so inclined. 43. Since the gap separating armchair wisdom from sweating performance is a chasm, it does not see much value in the I told you so syndrome or in pontification in the absence of responsibility. 43. It endorses instead the idea that in most cases self-righteousness is a diaphragm concealing from the ego its own loss of anima. 44. It does not see the past as sacred and worthy of return, nor does it see the present as the wreckage of such a sacred past. 44. It sees the past as nothing short of a miracle, and yet a very deficient one. It sees the present as demanding more commitment to all-pervading grace. 45. It does not go along with the idea that the urban context is built for a known society, if for no other reason than that the known society of today is not, and better not be, cannot be, the society of next year and next. 45. It assumes that only an environment which is constructed for an ideal and in many ways unknowable society will not shortchange the society which eventually inhabits it. 46. It does not identify the process of construction with the experience of the constructed and working town. 46. It distinguishes the process of construction from the experiencing of the town, since only the functioning instrument will be able to perform its own task. Thus concludes Arcology as intent. Archimedia. Synopsis. Information, interpretation, and expression find a friend and an enemy in electronic technology. It's urgent that the awesome power of light and sound be reintegrated within the environmental and existential context which originates them. The learning process will then be enhanced. One can say that the genealogy from the sun to the spirit is the subject matter of evolution. Consideration of this generation of consciousness within the folds of matter, this transformation of the raw and savage power of the sun into the biosphere and the homosphere of the earth, is not to be seen as the cult of cosmic furnace, but as the homage and investigation in awe and bewilderment of the order of a physical cosmos capable of generating within itself a consciousness of itself. The homage is to the deed which the spirit of life is about to perform, the actualization by metamorphosis of mass energy into a trans-universe which I choose to call aesthetic. This homage is the act of worship. This transformation of matter into form, this aesthetogenesis, is achieved only by the force of compassionate man transforming nature. The true act of worship is the aesthetic act by which man moves another step toward grace. The ontological, theological, and aesthetic are the funnel, the wind, and the pollen in the participatory act of creation of the universe of the spirit. Can one physically define a circumstance made of space and structure, where one has moved closer to the all-preceding creation? Only creation can beget creation. Therefore, there is dread of setting up a pedestal, which is the negation of the sculpture it will support, a sterile Archimedia. This is then not another attempt at making a harmonious environment for man to stroll about, nor a simulation machine for things which do not exist any longer, Walt Disney, nor a house of worship such as a church, a synagogue, or a mosque, nor a laboratory for the alchemy of technology, nor last of all a museum where things are brought to be viewed and dissected. It is intended as an aesthetically conceived framework that will contain, harbor, shelter, host, display, and chastise the efforts of individuals or groups who are trying to wedge themselves into the spatial, temporal, oral, sensory, existential immanence of reality in order to wrest away from the mineral another partial of matter to imbue it with the quivering of consciousness. This active filtering device is a means and a name in itself. It is the solicitor of genetic straining and pursuit of becoming, and it is the fruit of these same genes. It is therefore not just the hardware for creation, but a creature begetting others. If it were what it ought to be, it would be the bridge spanning the gulf between wishfulness and deed. Taking the wish as the face value of the deed, the program is then very clear. The genesis of the instrument, Archimedia, is of the same nature as the genesis which the instrument will partake in producing. This genesis is an aesthetogenesis, the extension of anthropogenesis into ever more rarefied realms of matter energy. Archimedia is not an instrument for survival, but an organism fertile with creations other than its original one. That is why it is not a museum or an art therapy center. It's not a place of worship as such, but a place where awe is objectified into sensory events. It is also not a house of God, but a God maker. The blasphemy is only in the degree of presumption and not in the presumption per se. Is it presumptuous to assume that we are more godlike than a pile of rubble? If consciousness means to be of the process, then just strolling about in and on the body of the self-making God, a promenading passivity, is the true blasphemy. Concurrently, the characterization as an amusement park or fictional simulation environment is inappropriate, not because it might be incapable of sustaining such things, but because it stands for what it is and it does, not for what it might fake. The scientist, the priest, and the artist focus from three different directions on truth, justice, love, and creation. The intellect is made sensuous flesh to add to the in vitro analysis of the flesh components, the somatic sensitive synthesis of responses to its own maker, or cause, or midwife, the sun, the astronomical furnace related to the earth so as to be the sustenance of what it had been, itself the prior originator, life. The matter-of-factness of our relationship with the environment, the interface of no interface between the I and the it which routinely briefs the mind and the body on the context of the moment, the response of the I to the incoming assault of the it, and its negative predisposition toward the delicate balancing act of the I. This routine of being sensorially plugged into the nature can and ought to be brought to the light of consciousness frequently and, if only in flashes, empowered with the joyfulness of discovery and participation. The person who, predisposed toward the discovery of truth and science, lovingly and sensuously opens himself or herself to the vivifying truth of religion which empowers it, in the tension and anguish of the moment, constructs, creates the aesthetic. Archimedia, the etherealized topography, would lend its structure and form to the moment of creation. The difference between the school and Archimedia stems from the difference between the learning of a certain skill and the application of it. Conceding that it is in the application of something that an idea or a sign is sharpened and rounded, the fundamental difference remains that in the learning process as such, the focus of action is on learning itself, that is to say, there is no focus to work toward other than the apprehension of a certain aptness. On the other hand, the use of an apprehended idea or skill must have a focus and scope which transcends them. Therefore, for instance, the net and sharp separation between the context in which the master performs and that in which the apprentice learns. The process of learning, both per se and abstractly, is the appropriation, internalization of an otherness. The process of creating is the transcendence of the enriched self, giving a new parameter of reality to otherness. The anguish appears not in the appropriative stage of the process, as in the recipient's passivity of the student being just the process of self-augmenting and informing, but in the anticipatory stages preceding, without any guarantee of success, transcendence, and creation. It is there on the testing ground of the soul of the ambiguities of both the I and the it come to do battle and to bring anxiety. The seams that good sense and logic have sewn, optimistically or expediently, to bind the strands of information into the bag of knowledge begin to give way as creation bursts from the rationality of a position to the transrationality of a becoming which is incommensurable with its matrix. Learning and discovery, scientific work, are more germane than learning and creating, in agreement with the proven fact that the most fruitful period in the scientist's life is the 20s and 30s. Discovering is, after all, a more original way of learning. The discoverer is a pioneer in a learning, the first to climb a certain mountain. The mountain will be rediscovered time and time again by the student who finds paths, ladders, ropes, and signs, which are the props and information easing his task of apprehension. The same props and information can dull the experience, the toll of non-originality. The tax is the ennui of learning, and its presence is not the fault of the object matter, but of the subject student when and for whom discovery has been lost to drudgery. The discoverer and inventor of a paradigm is the explorer seeing some of its own conjecture confirmed by the solidity of a landscape. The consumer of the same paradigm is the settler, whose anxiety is not of the order of true and false, but of easy or hard. For creation, both anxieties, true or false, hard or easy, do not come to grips with existential anguish. The what and the how are superseded by the why, on which the aesthetic metamorphosis comes about. Nor should the why constantly asked by science be confused with the why with which philosophy battles. The why of science refers to an accepted if unfathomable reality, the why of philosophy to one's willingness to accept and abide by a possibility unfathomable reality. One is about knowledge of what is, epistemology, and the other is about acceptance of what ought to be, ontology, eschatology. Creation is the offspring that the manipulation of the two ways is able to transact. On one hand, what they are is not what they can become. On the other, just because they are, they must transcend themselves into an as-yet non-active metamorphosis. Discovery is understanding. Invention is coordination manipulation. Creation is metamorphosis. Archimedia optimally is the staging for metamorphosis, a metamorphosis itself of some power, so as not to contradict at the outset the aim of the effort, which is, by the way, the common ill of places of learning or of work. Places of pettiness, of ostentation, of sterility, of squalor, of dereliction, of dehumanization, of naught. It is also neither a Woodstock nor an Apollo launching pad. A Woodstock is where the soul is mired by the mind, lying itself into mindlessness, where the effacement of conflict is the wiping out of the person, where even survival cannot risk a fourth day, where simplicity is elemental parasitism, where the tribe raped of its structure is only the mob. The Apollo scenario is where raw technology is rampant technology, where intelligence is pitted against conscience, where the complicated and brain-bugging coordinations mystify the complexity of man's mind, where materials and energies are wappishly single-minded and thrown into the time-space venture. Here the sap of life is made too much like a superfuel to run in the involute plumbing of rockets, not in the involute arteries of the flesh. Woodstock is life residual. Apollo is life interstitial. As the ecological status quo is taken to task by the frenzy of the Western Homo faber, and some ecologist Philistine less bright than expected dwells on the egalitarianism of man, animals, and trees, the human biological tonnage, to speak only of the physical bulk, is steamrolling ever more land, mainly for the dormitories of the affluent nations. The self-righteous ecologist pietist Woodstock or Apollonian is tuning out through the simplistic way of the tribe, be it ape-naked Woodstock or electro-castrated Apollo. The furiously disciplined mega-machine of nature could hardly believe her eyes, if she had any, and indeed she has them 3 billion pairs. Soon the ecologist pietist, more sentient, future-oriented, conscious in his fantasies of the low-keyed harmony between man and nature, should put his ear to the deafening howling of mineral nature, upset once and ever since by the disturbing, unbalancing, arrogant jellies coalescing in primeval seas and early lagoons. How dare they? The mineral says, and says again. Thus concludes section 4:12 of the Omega Seed by Paolo Soleri. Tomorrow I will continue with section 4:13, original and radical. I'll see you then. Olam.